Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
I knew your pause was going to be extra long after someone criticized you on the last show for having an insufficient power pause. It's tough criticism. We always try to incorporate our listeners' feedback into the show. Glad to see you were able to do that in that case. Well done.
Thank you, Tom. I do appreciate criticism, even if it's not accurate or hurtful. I mean, it's all, as long as it's coming from a place of jealousy, I guess. You know, that's when you know it's the best kind of criticism. Tom, how am I doing? Thank you for asking. I'm doing well. I'm still recovering from a sunburn. Earlier today, I was wearing a green shirt, and my wife was like, "No, you can't do green and a red face. The red will pop out from the green, and you have to." So I guess if I just wear red and red, like one red will diminish the other red. So this is the most planning I've ever done for a podcast, Tom.
I'm glad your wife was able to give you feedback then. Not apparently about sunscreen several days ago, but she got there. She got there eventually. That's good.
Just like a wife, right?
I have no answer that's not going to get me in trouble. So let's just start the show.
Let us start the show, Tom. And today, we're going to be talking about some college football stuff. College football. Bet Online released their conference championship odds, and I thought we would start there and just discuss some of the odds that are out there, and also what we think would be some good bets. So, Tom, what I've done is I've given both you and me $100 of Buckeye Weekly bucks, and that's basically as good as cash.
Are those redeemable at like local establishments? Can I just, instead of doing this show, can I go like get lunch, maybe hit happy hour or something?
No, they're only redeemable at Buckeye Weekly Land, and only Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and only from the 34 and 17-yard line. So it's going to be difficult to redeem them. But Tom, so what I wanted us to do, and first we'll talk about some of these odds, but then we'll make take 5 bets, like $20 on 5 different things, how we think things will shake out, or what we think would be good bets, and then criticize each other for them from a place of care and understanding, of course.
Of course. Where else would it come from, Tony? I don't know what the other option might be.
Abhorrence, one. So let's discuss. I'll just give you like the top 3 from each conference, the 3 best odds. And the odds, so let's just start with the Big Ten and Ohio State. The best odds of any of the conferences, Ohio State 1-2 odds to win the Big Ten, which is a considerably heavy favorite. That means, Tom, you'd have to bet $20 to win 10, basically. And then Wisconsin is the second highest odds, second best odds at 10-1, and then poor old Michigan at 11-1. ACC, again, Clemson, I don't know, they may have had a down year last year. They still won 10 games. They're still in the ACC. Kenny Pickett is gone. They are 2-3 favorites to win. Miami at 5-1 is next, and we'll get to Miami later. Miami, to me, is, I see them there. I don't consider them at all. And then after that is Pittsburgh at 9-1. And then we go to the SEC, Alabama 1-1, straight up the favorite to win. Georgia 5-4, a little slightly worse, and then Texas. Then you go all the way down to third, Texas A&M, 11-1. I think that might be a sneaky bet, Tom. Let's if you want to use some $20 somewhere, that might be where. And then at Pac-12, the Lincoln Riley factor is alive and well. USC, the favorite at 2-1, then Oregon slightly less at 11-5, and then Utah, another keep your eye on Utah, 5-1 there. And then now we go all the way to the Big 12, the final of our Power 5 conferences. Oklahoma is the favorite at 7-4, followed by Texas at 2-1, and then Oklahoma State at 5-1. So, Tom, I guess we'll just go back and forth a little bit in terms of overall your initial thoughts on all of these, any of these. What struck you?
I guess I should start with sort of explaining my thinking on all of this, which is, like, yeah, you could bet on Ohio State. You could just throw your whole $100 on Ohio State. and let the casino hold your money for the next 6 months. And at the current rate of inflation, you would end up netting out an actual real gain of about 13 cents. So, like, yeah, Ohio State is almost certainly going to be the winner of the Big Ten this year. You might look at those odds and call them a prohibitive favorite. And the reason they're a prohibitive favorite is because the odds are stacked such that you are pretty much prohibited from making that bet unless you just want to let the casino hold your money for a while. So I'm generally looking for a little more value. So these are not necessarily the teams I think are most likely to win, but these are the teams who I think there's probably some value there. They might be a little bit, they might be a little underpriced. And, I mean, technically, Tony, if we were doing this the way we normally do this, we would parlay a couple really outlandish things together. And, if this one ticket hits, I will have the GDP of Mozambique in my bank account in, 6 months. That's how we typically do it, but we're idiots. So, don't necessarily. There's a reason that Mark Givler and Bill Green host the Vegas Knows podcast and not us.
The parlay thing would be a good idea because I'm looking at it and like you, I don't like low value like results, but if you parlay Ohio State, Clemson, and Alabama, now you've created something. And that would probably be the best way to go because if you just take all of the favorites in this, I think you make like, $20 total, basically after all is said and done, you don't make a ton. But if you just want to make sure you don't lose anything, maybe like, I think my first three bets would be like Ohio State, Clemson, and Alabama. That way I know that I'm going to break even. But then you're only using like $40 to go and have fun with. And that's kind of like, I'd like to have more fun than that. But I do want to spend a little bit of time on Miami. Because yes, they new coach, new everything. But to me, and I've said this about other things before, but they are a non-playable character for me. They're just in the background. I see them with the second best odds, and it's like, yeah, you're there. I don't know why you're there. You're there to help the mission. I would never put money on Miami to win anything. It's not. I would rather throw $20 on Boston College at 40-1, and I would feel better about their chances than Miami at 5-1. Now, would it help if I knew the divisions? Of course. But am I going to learn the divisions? No. Especially as we'll get to maybe later in the show about how divisions might be going away. But I just look at Miami, and there are other programs as well where I see you there. I don't acknowledge you, like Florida at 33-1 or whatever. Even Penn State at 12-1, I don't really buy into them. You just kind of skip over them and gloss over them. But Tom, if you were to look at this Big Ten, what is the best value there?
The Big Ten, like I went through the 5, we were going to do 5 bets, and I went through the 5 power conferences, and I got to the Big Ten, and I said, pass. I don't really see a tremendous amount of value here. Like, if you're going to bet something here, it feels like you bet Michigan, because Michigan's schedule is just so soft that really you're just saying, well, they're probably going to be 10-1 at worst coming into Columbus, and then, whatever the odds are that they're going to be less than, I don't know what the odds are going to be for that game. Ohio State will be favored by a couple touchdowns or whatever, but, for them to be, it's going to be better than 11-1 that they win that Ohio State game. So, and then you play in the Big Ten championship game, and that's at worst a toss up, and you look at the history there, and the East team almost always wins. So, if you were going to put money on someone in the Big Ten, I would put it on Michigan. I don't think that's going to happen. If you look at the history of teams either playing Ohio State the week after Ohio State has lost, or playing teams playing Ohio State the year after they have beaten Ohio State, it doesn't happen all that often. But the result generally involves murder, and that it seems like that's probably not going to go great for Michigan. They've lost some talent. It's in Columbus. They haven't won in Columbus in 22 years. It just seems like that's not going to go great. And then you would need Ohio State to lose 2. You need Michigan to win all their other games and Ohio State to lose 2 Big Ten games, which I guess is theoretically possible, but just doesn't seem particularly likely. So That's where I guess the value is, but I think I'm just going to sort of pass on the Big Ten and throw a couple bets down on a different conference.
Yeah, well, what's go ahead and give me one of yours, and we'll go back and forth here quickly.
So I'm gonna start in the ACC, and Clemson is obviously the one that is, the again very heavy favorite. The one that I think is kind of interesting is North Carolina State. They are second in the ACC in SP+. They're ranked 15th in SP+. They have a ton of returning production coming back. They're priced fourth. They're priced as the fourth most likely to win the ACC, and they're second in SP+. So that tells me there's probably some value there. And, they have to go to Clemson, but that's like September 30th. It's pretty early in the season, and maybe Clemson's still figuring some stuff out, and North Carolina State has a lot of veteran guys back. You win that one, maybe it happens. And I mean, this is North Carolina State is like the most loosey pulling the football team out there, which is probably part of why the odds are what they are, because it feels like, just purely looking at it as objectively, they should be more likely than, what were they, 11-1, 14-1, something like that. They were
10-1 North Carolina State.
10-1 North Carolina State. So yeah, 10-1. I mean, are you telling me that Pittsburgh, which just lost Kenny Pickett, also just lost their wide receiver who it was in the Biletnikoff Award, and needed everything to go right last year to win the ACC? You're telling me that Pitt is more likely to win the ACC than North Carolina State this year? I don't really see that. So NC State would be my play there.
Yeah, I have them as well. I think they return more starters than anybody else in the ACC. And again, it's just, you can bet on Ohio State and you can bet on Clemson, and that will pay out about $23 total. Now you'll get your investment back. So like, you figure if you bet on Ohio State, you bet on Clemson, and you bet on Alabama, and those three teams win, like, you will take home $100, like $103, like after all is said and done. And so you'll get the money back that way. But have you really done anything with it? No. You've just, now I've done nothing, and I had a good day of doing nothing. And so, yeah, I'm with you on North Carolina State. Tom, I like Utah at 5-1 because USC, I think everybody expects something there. Oregon, I think you might have a little downturn there. Utah is just consistent. They're just always consistent. They do what they do. They can overcome losing players and whatever, and they've just always got something, and they know how to do it. They know what to do. And so I like them at 5-1. That would be one of my plays. And it's not a huge payout, but I think to get Utah at 5-1, I don't think that's too bad.
No, I think Ohio State fans maybe have a new appreciation for Utah after that Rose Bowl and the emotional roller coaster that was against a team that, on paper, Ohio State should have beaten by 1,000,000 points and just barely escaped against. That's a good one. The Pac-12 feels wide open, and USC at 2-1. If you've ever heard people use the phrase "public team," that is another. The polite way to say this is a team that is famous and stupid people bet on them, so we're going to price that in accordingly. And it doesn't matter what the odds are, because it's like, well, they're a good team. And I mean, I've heard so much about Lincoln Riley, and they brought in all these they brought in this Caleb Williams, and they brought in all these transfers, and oh my goodness, it's Lincoln Riley, and this is going to be incredible, and they're going to be great immediately. It's like, well, the roster there is not tremendous right now, even with the addition of some of those other guys, and it's his first year there, and yes, his quarterback has played under him before, so he knows the system, but there's a lot of stuff that would need to go right for them. So yeah, the USC, I think, is the one that if you just pull a random person off the street and ask them to pick a thing off this list, they're going to say USC. I think Utah is a much smarter play there. I actually had a different team there out of the Pac-12, and this is a little bit of a longer shot, and frankly, I thought would be priced as an even longer shot than it is. Washington at 11-1. Washington was 4-8 last year. Jimmy Lake was not a great hire, as it turns out, and kind of flew the plane straight into the side of the mountain. So now they've got Kalen DeBoer up there, and I don't think that roster is nearly as bad as the results last year would have led you to believe. They've got, I think there's a lot to like there. in terms of opportunity for immediate growth and immediate turnaround, there's so much, USC has a first-year coach, Oregon has a first-year coach, Washington has a first-year coach. So like a lot of the teams that you'd have at the top of that list, those are all teams that are, have that same first-year coach thing. Like someone has to win this conference. So Utah is a very smart pick in terms, your idea there, I think, is a good one. Washington they have to go to Oregon, but they miss Utah and USC cross division. Oregon has to play Utah. You saw Oregon play Utah twice last year. Didn't go great. Did not go tremendously well for the Ducks. So you have a little bit of a schedule advantage there. That conference feels pretty wide open. So I think I like just the value on Washington there. Before we move on from the Pac-12, Tony, Arizona State 17-2. Can you find me someone who would like to bet on this particular Arizona State team coached by this particular Arizona State coaching staff and this particular Arizona State administration, and would like to put actual real American currency on them to win the Pac-12? Because Tony, I am not a bookie, but friends, I will take that action if you want to put money on Arizona State to win the Pac-12 this year.
I don't. That one was bizarre to me. I expect them to be, as everybody does. Well, not everybody. They're going to be terrible, and it's a program in shambles. There's no culture there. There's no reason that they should be to have the fourth highest odds, along with UCLA at 17-2. Even like just a random Stanford, David Shaw. There's like hope there. Like why would there be any hope or expectations for Arizona State? But I also think it's a tale about the whole Pac-12 as well, that there's just no. Arizona is 500-1. I won't be shocked if Arizona has a better year than Arizona State, like just because. And they had, Colorado. We're both hoping for them to eventually do better, but yeah, Arizona State, I thought people would have given up on them by now, and it's strange that they haven't, especially when you consider what's going on in other conferences where, this is also a tale of the SEC, where you've got LSU is 50-1, Auburn is 66-1, Arkansas is 66-1, where these are pretty good programs and pretty good teams, and they have high hopes, and they are like no shot. Another one that I like, Tom, as I scroll through here, try to get back to it, Baylor at 15-2, because I'm not sold on Oklahoma at all anymore. Texas, you got to beat Kansas before I'll believe in you the next year. Oklahoma State 5-1 is intriguing. They return a lot, but they lose Jim Knowles, so you got to figure, as somebody who covers Ohio State like we do, you got to figure there's going to be a step back, because you lose that guy. Baylor, it just feels right to me. They've got this thing going. They've got their culture. They've got their program set now, and I think there's just a lot of questions everywhere else. And I also think, I don't care what has come and gone, now might be the time where Iowa State becomes a viable bet, because there are no expectations. But I do also realize that if I was going to take this seriously, I would have looked at all of the scheduling first to see where these programs are in terms of the road trips and things like that. But I like Baylor at 15-2 in a Big 12 that is completely who knows right now.
Yeah, I also had Baylor out of the Big 12. They do have to go to Oklahoma. They have to go to Texas. I took the exercise a little more seriously because I respect the listeners and the viewers, but that's okay. As long as one of us does, we're batting 500. That's fine. Oklahoma has new coach, new quarterback, a whole bunch of stuff because Lincoln Riley stripped the copper wire out of the walls on his way out of town. Texas, we'll see what happens with the quarterback situation there. A story that Ohio State fans may be somewhat invested in to one degree or another this fall. You have, second-year coach Steve Sarkisian down there. Texas, also in my notes, I have Texas is Texas, which, if you have watched college football, you know what that means. And if you've not watched college football, Baylor is 30th in SP+. Texas is 33rd in SP+. The odds for Texas to win the Big 12 are 2-1, while the odds for Baylor to win the Big 12 are 15-2. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk about Texas football.
That's pretty good. What all right, so you've got the Baylor as well. I went ahead and took free money with Alabama. I'm just going to do that. Texas A&M, I might throw a 20 on as well.
I hate that you and I are so similar on this stuff. We should be arguing, and we're like almost in lockstep. I have Alabama, and my notes are in entirety Alabama : is Alabama, like 1-1. Like, yep, sure. I mean, and if you don't want to see Alabama win and go to the college football playoff again, like, okay, cool, it's an emotional hedge, I guess. But yeah, I mean, who would you like to bet against Alabama winning? You know, the SEC. Who's beating Alabama this year? Because Georgia's taken a step back. I have Alabama and Texas A&M. This is my conference with two picks. Alabama because they're Alabama, and Texas A&M because 11-1 is like, well, you know, maybe they have. This is a little like the Michigan thing where it's like, well, they made the mistake of beating Alabama last year, so that seems like you're probably going into the wood chipper this year, feet first. But you know, who knows? Maybe something crazy happens. But yeah, I think Alabama is the smart bet, and Texas A&M is the, well, throw $20 on it and see what happens.
The unfortunate thing is Texas A&M goes to Tuscaloosa this year, so that wood chipper might be especially southern. So I think I did also go with. So I went North Carolina State. We've gone Alabama, Texas A&M. I did Utah, and Baylor. Is that 5, Tom? Did I do 5? Did I give you 5?
I think so. Yeah.
And you went? Did we get your 5 as well?
Yes, I said Baylor, Washington, Texas A&M, Alabama, and NC State. So, and if you do, I ran stuff through a parlay calculator.
Yes, I was just going to say, I wish we would have done that.
Well, good news. Again, respect for the listeners, respect for the viewers. This is what I'm here for. According to the covers.com parlay calculator, Ohio State and Alabama and Clemson all parlayed together is going to give you a $500 payout on $100. So it's basically 4-1. So you win $400 on a $100 bet. And I mean, that's not bad. Frankly, that's probably more appealing to me than betting on, you know, Alabama individually or betting on Michigan individually. Or I mean, that's probably the first thing I put down.
Yeah, I was going to ask because I like that bet better than any of the other bets that we talked about. Any of the other, you know, Baylor at 15-2 or whatever. I feel more confident about that, and I like the 4-1 payout more than any of the other bets because that feels like, and I agree. I know free money is not actually free and it does not exist, but that feels pretty close to free money to me. And Tom, we can be at Wheeling Island by about 3:00 if we go now.
Yeah, unless there's a way that I'm not aware of to short a bet, like you can short a stock, and if I can short the Arizona State at 17-2, unless that happens, yeah, I think that parlay is your best bet, and you know, that's we have made a stop at Wheeling Island at least once on a trip east, and you know, and if we have do we have a trip east this summer? I don't know if we do. Probably not before. Well, I don't think Ohio State plays Penn State. I don't think Ohio State plays Penn State in July. So no, probably not.
No, that's all right. That's okay. It's just for fun anyway. So Tom, also we want to discuss this NCAA Oversight Committee coming in and recommending a couple of pretty sizable changes, but changes that are expected to be ratified and approved by the end of the month. One is removing the rules for conference championship games and how they are determined. Like the current rules are basically if you have, I think, like more than 12 or more teams, you have to have them in divisions. And what this is going to then allow conferences to do is to do away with divisions if they want, or just be able to determine who their conference championship teams are. And not that they would just random, you know, not a random number generator or say it's just going to be Michigan or Ohio State. Like they can go divisionless, and the top 2 records, the top 2 ranked teams or whatever would then go to the conference championship game. I think when we'll discuss whether this is a good thing or not a good thing. And the other thing that has been recommended is a 2-year waiver for unlimited recruiting classes in terms of the 25 cap. They will still have to hit that 85 number or not go past it. Not quote unquote, not go past it. But there are a lot of teams that are under right now and they can't catch up quickly enough because they have to stay at that 25 or even the early signing where you can sign more, but backdate some of these guys. They're still not able to get to that 85 quickly because of COVID and transfers and all of these various things going on right now. And so the recommendation is that you just allow somebody, if they need to sign 40, let them go do it. And that also helps the high school kids that will have more places to go and allow programs to deal with the seismic nature of college football right now. Let's start with there, Tom. What do you think about this?
Tony, I think more than anything else that has happened in the last 2 to 3 years, this is the clearest sign that Houston Nutt has to be coming back to college football soon. I mean, that is the 40-man class was the old Houston Nutt special at Ole Miss. Back then it was oversigning and it was processing kids and it was, that was not a good thing because you're bringing in a ton of kids. And the reason it got cut back was because people were bringing in a ton of kids and essentially cutting the ones who didn't, weren't good enough. And, at that point, kids didn't, players didn't have an opportunity to just immediately enroll somewhere else. Now you've given, the players have a lot more agency than they did before. You see players using that agency, which has left some teams very shorthanded. I'm fine with that. And, if you want to make this a 30 scholarship cap per year or 35 or whatever, that's fine. Unlimited seems a little, unlimited is always a little like someone's going to sign 63 people this year, which is not great. But I think in general, like it is a reflection of the realities of the sport right now. As you said, it is more opportunities. I think ultimately you are also going to end up leading to a lot of unintended consequences of players being there a year and getting processed because, okay, we're at 85, but I mean, like very clearly, we don't think that you're going to be here. And, you're going to see a lot more guys transferring in that first year than you did before. So, there's definitely a downside here as well. But I see the value in this because you do have programs. I mean, Kansas after Charlie Weiss, when David Beatty took that program over, he's not the current coach, but he was a coach before the current coach there. When David Beatty took that program over, Charlie Weiss had basically just tried to go the JUCO route and signed a ton of JUCO kids to kind of get the win immediately thing going, and it didn't work. And then you didn't have 4 years worth of players, and so he ended up. I think David Beatty had 43 players or something like that his first spring on scholarship, which is like that takes forever to dig out from, and he didn't even have the time to do it before he got fired. So, you potentially help teams like that who can maybe dig out of a hole a little quicker. So, there are definitely some downsides to this, and there will definitely be an ugly side to this that, is the same essentially ugly side that you saw before, but at least now players have a little bit more of an option in terms of immediate eligibility and not having to sit out a year if they get kicked to the curb.
That Houston Nutt 37 player class from 2009, I'm wondering if he had unlimited, the over-under, Tom, on an unlimited class for Houston Nutt, I'm going to put at, and you're just going to say over immediately, like 50, 51 and a half, something like that, where is it Air Force and like the military, the academies, like you look at their signees, their recruits in like the Phil Steele magazine, and sometimes it's just this like long list of players because there are really no caps there for those programs. But yeah, that you might need a whole separate page for a Houston Nutt class of signees in this. And I think you're right that unlimited is, when you tell coaches something is unlimited and you tell programs something is unlimited, then they just hear go crazy. And you say, but did you hear about the 85? And they're like, so, you had me at unlimited, and I did not. I shut you off there with the rest, and we'll deal with whatever the. Did you hear what she said? No, we'll figure it out. Like, no, I was not listening. I stopped listening. I'm sure it was nothing. Now let's go. And so yeah, I think obviously it's a good thing to help these programs get back, but we'll see the unintended consequences that come from it. As again, you throw more players into the system, more players are going to be heading for the portal. That's just how math works, Tom. And I'm a pretty good math person.
When the people ask me to describe you, and I say, "Are you recording this?" and they say yes, I say he's a pretty good math person. I think one of the things that is going to be really interesting to track 12, 24, 36 months down the line from when, if and when this goes into effect, is number of players in the portal who don't end up finding another home. Because right now, that number, it feels like the number, I think the last time I saw it, it was like 40% or so of players who had entered the portal had actually ended up at another program. And, if you're an Ohio State fan, you're thinking, oh, pretty much all of the players who left Ohio State have found another program. Well, that's because if you're not good enough to start at Ohio State, there's lots of other programs where you probably are good enough to start. There's a lot of players a little further down the chain who are not finding it so easy to find a landing spot. And, you're probably going to have that number of, the percentage that find a new landing spot. That's probably going to go down because you've got more people. You're incentivizing coaches to process more people. And, if they're being, if the unlimited recruiting signing is, still against the 85 cap and you're bringing in 35 people, well, you have fewer transfer spots. So there probably will be a market for people trying to live more or less out of the portal. And there are programs kind of doing that already to some degree already. But I do wonder if this is going to end up with a lot of people going into the portal and not ever coming out of it, because it feels like it probably will.
I think some of the stuck in the portal is overblown, because this is also how players quit nowadays. Like, this is how they quit football, is they just go into the portal. In the past, they would just, I'm transferring, and then they go get a job, or they go somewhere else and they don't play football. But for these kids who are going to be like second-year guys who are going to be hitting the portal, that's not necessarily going to be the case for them, as they're just, as you said, being processed. Because you can sign 45 guys, that how 2/3 of them aren't good enough to play for you. You're just hoping you cast a wide net and you hope you get a couple of hits out of the 20 that can't play for you. Maybe 3 pop up and surprise you, and you're like, oh, that was a good haul. That was 3 out of 20. Man, I'll take that again. And you just keep doing that each year, and it's makes for a lot of uncomfortable conversations. But hey, podcasts are uncomfortable conversations. Tom, the removing of the divisions, I want us to imagine this in the Big Ten. And the ACC, I think Andy Staples talking about how the way it's probably going to work in the ACC, the way they're proposing it, is that each team plays 3 teams every year. Like, you keep 3 opponents that you're going to stick with, and then you cycle through the other 10 programs over a 4-year period, like home and home over a 4-year period. So, like, basically everybody, if they're there for 4 years, will get to play every team in every venue. And I think that's a really good plan. And I think that's what you would see from any 14-team conference. And I think that would be the best thing for the Big Ten as well. But how do you feel about a divisionless Big Ten? Because I'm all for it. I think it's when the 2 best teams or 3 best teams at times are in the East, kind of screwing the East by not allowing the second best team to play in Indianapolis.
Yeah, this is one of those things where I think there's a lot, we do it the way we do it right now because that's the way they've always done it. And, in this case, always goes back to 1992 when the SEC started doing their divisions, or 1991, whatever that was. But it's not because it's like the best way, because there are plenty of there are plenty of conferences where it's like the ACC champion. You go through and it's like Clemson. And they didn't, Pitt won last year, but it was just like the Clemson Invitational for a while. And it was like, which team from the Coastal Division is just going to get slaughtered? And every year they did. And, that's the Big Ten. The Big Ten is like the Big Ten East Invitational. And it's usually Ohio State, but every once in a while it's Michigan who beats the team from the West, or it's Penn State who beats the team from the West, or it's Michigan State who beats the team from the West, but they always beat the team from the West. Like, you at this point, like this game is not really like, it sells some hotel rooms in Indianapolis and fills some TV inventory, and that's great, but it's not, it very clearly is not matching the 2 best teams every year. So let's try something different. And, you look at Ohio State, like Ohio State, they didn't go to Illinois in 2020 because of COVID, which means that when is the next Illinois trip? 2023, maybe? And they haven't been to Illinois since 2015, something like that. I mean, it's just, I have been back on the beat since 2017, and I have yet to be to Illinois. So this is very obviously not happening. So if you're not playing a team in the other division and you're not going to their stadium like pretty much ever, are you really in the same conference? Like the SEC is worse because they only play 8 conference games and they have 6 divisional teams plus 1 protected cross-divisional game. So there's only 1 team in the other division other than your protected cross-division game that you play. So they will go 12 years playing once in those opposing stadiums. So Texas A&M will play in Gainesville once in the first 12 years they're in the SEC. Like at that point, are you in the same conference? Because it feels like you're kind of not. So yeah, I am all for the switch to the pod thing. The Big Ten, it's really interesting to try and work out the Big Ten pods, because if you start with Ohio State, as I'm sure everyone listening to this podcast does, you go, well, okay, they're going to be in a pod with Penn State and Michigan and Michigan State. Okay, great. Now who else is there? Now, okay, let's go to Penn State. Who is Penn State in a pod with? Okay, well, they have Ohio State, Michigan, and Michigan State. Okay, great. So who's Rutgers in a pod with? Well, Rutgers is going to want to be in a pod with Penn State. Okay, well, forget Rutgers. Who's Maryland going to be in a pod with? Well, they're going to want to be in a pod with Penn State. Like, okay, now what? Like, how do you keep everyone happy? And, the easy answer is you tell Rutgers to shut up and go back to the kids' table, but that's not necessarily how the Big Ten's going to run. So if Penn State is playing in a pod with Rutgers and Maryland and Ohio State, okay, but then you're not getting Penn State, Michigan every year. You're not getting Penn State, Michigan State for the handsomest trophy in all of college sports, the Land-Grant Trophy. Like, it's a little bit messy, and I feel like, that would probably be a fun show. Hey, summer's coming up. We have lots of shows to fill. Maybe you and I should put together pods and see how closely we come together in terms of who plays who. Because it's like this seems in theory like it should be a really easy exercise, and then you're just going to get the equivalent of the SEC's cross division, where it's like, oh, well, there's so many logical cross-division games, and, Georgia and Auburn play the Deep South's oldest rivalry. So, of course, they would continue that. Alabama and Tennessee play the third Saturday in October rivalry. You're like, absolutely, this makes a ton of sense. And Mississippi State and Kentucky play because, well, they had 2 teams left.
Tom, you want to talk about summer shows? Like, I can show you my spreadsheet of just the Big Ten and SEC as they become these gravitational forces of 2 24-team conferences, and you've got like 4 pods of 6 in each conference, and you basically become an NFC and an AFC, because you look at what television is doing. The Big Ten and the SEC are going to surpass everybody. They're going to double them up. They're going to lap them, and at some point it's going to behoove these other conference teams to be like, we should leave the Big 12 and go to either the Big 10 or the SEC. It doesn't matter which. If somebody will take us, we should go, because it would be better to make $100 million a year than 30, in my opinion. And again, I am the math guy.
The college president version of rich folks only in my mentions. Like, that's just, SEC, Big 10, like whatever, man. Like, if you are the guy with the big wad of bills holding it up to your head like you're talking on a phone, if that is your conference, please slide into these DMs, and sincerely everyone in the ACC and Big 12 and Pac 12, and that's a whole separate show. But yeah, in general, this idea of pods, I think, makes a ton of sense. You get to play more different teams. You get to actually be in a legitimate conference and see, if you're playing a 4-year career, you're going to play everyone in your conference during your 4-year career. It makes a more interesting product during the regular season. You could have a rematch in the Big Ten championship game. You could have potentially Ohio State, Michigan play one week, and then Ohio State, Michigan play again. Didn't that happen? No, that didn't happen last year. There was some question whether that might happen with Bedlam, and then the Big 12 championship game again, but Baylor got in there. So, but it's not 100% perfect. but it feels like it's a better solution than just Ohio State goes to Indianapolis and just caves in, someone's head once again this year.
I think it's also interesting that you play all of these teams over 4 years, and it's still just 8 conference games. So then you can do the alliance, if it's still a thing. I don't know. With the ACC and the Big 12, the Big 10, and the Pac-12, and experience that as well. I also, Tom, think this is a way. If the Big 10 does this, it's giving some ground on they want automatic qualifiers for the eventual 12-team playoff. Some people are against that. One of the reasons is, well, what if an 8-4 team wins it? And then that team doesn't deserve to be in. And now you shouldn't have that situation. You may still, but it's less likely that a second place team in the conference is going to be 8-4 or whatever. So having the 2 best teams in there and eliminating the 8-4, that 7-5 team from making the playoffs, maybe that softens some of the hard stances against automatic qualifiers.
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing that it solves, and that's a pretty rare thing that you would have that. I mean, I'm going back through the Big Ten history, and I think the only really egregious Big Ten champion was Wisconsin in 2012, and that was the year Ohio State was ineligible and Penn State was ineligible, and so Wisconsin was the 3rd place team in the East, the leaders. Boy, I don't know why I still have that information in my brain. And then Nebraska came out of the Legends division, and then Wisconsin scored 70 points on them and then got to go to the Rose Bowl with like an 8-4 team. And that team doesn't deserve to be in the college football playoff. But if it was just the 2 best teams in the Big Ten outside of those, out regardless of division, then Wisconsin's probably not in that spot. I don't remember who else was at the top of the Big Ten that year, but they would have gotten murdered in the college football playoff. But again, that's what happens when you have 2 of your kind of powerhouse programs sitting on the sideline for NCAA stuff. So that's a pretty unique situation. And you're going to have, if an 8-4, let's say an 8-4 Pac-12 Clay Helton USC champion team slid into the college football playoff, they would be an unworthy champion. Tony, guess what? I don't think they would be a champion, so I think this would be one of those things that sort of sorted itself out in the end.
Yeah, you're creating problems when you don't even need a solution for the problem because it's so rare. I want to get right back to the Michigan State thing, and then we'll end it, because I'm with you. That's immediately who I think of in terms of who would Ohio State's 3 annual opponents be, and then I'm wondering, like, why? Yes. Obviously, the Big Ten is probably not going to separate Ohio State and Penn State. Do we need Michigan State there? Would I rather have Nebraska? Of course. Does it need to be Ohio State, Penn State, or Michigan State, Penn State, and Michigan in Ohio State's pod? Can they replace one? Can they replace 2? Penn State will probably have to be tied to Rutgers and Maryland, perhaps. And so then that eliminates either Michigan or Ohio State from them. But it is interesting that everybody's going to think those 4 teams belong together. But what if we don't, Tom? What if we don't and we split up? Like, does Ohio State need to play Michigan State every year? I mean, you mentioned Illinois. Do you know how long it has been since we got to see Illabuck? It's been, I don't know, a long time.
2017, it rained sideways. That was the game where you have the legendary video of the woman falling out of the stands. Yes, that's the last time Ohio State and Illinois played. Now, that involved a global pandemic, but it's 2017. It has been a hot minute. I did look up real quickly who would have been the second team in the Big Ten championship game in 2012. Tony, it's not great. It is not, strictly speaking, what you'd want. Better than that. Not Danny Hope, Brady Hoke. Michigan 6-2 in conference. They lost. They got clobbered by Alabama to start the season. Lost to Notre Dame. Lost at Nebraska. Lost to Ohio State. And then that was the Clowney Outback Bowl game. The one where Clowney sent Vincent Smith's helmet into orbit. But instead, if you would either get Bo Pelini in the college football playoff or Brady Hoke in the college football playoff. Tony, who says no?
The college football playoff?
Arguably, yes. So my advice would be that Ohio State and Penn State not get on NCAA bowl bans. That would be my suggestion to those two programs to avoid such a situation in the future. To your point, I think realistically, and this is kind of gross, but I think realistically, if you're going to have Maryland and Rutgers and Penn State in a pod, you're probably, as Ohio State, you're going to have Penn State because Penn State will throw a fit if they're not tied to Ohio State. And you're going to have Ohio State and Michigan, obviously. I think that third one, one of those Maryland or Rutgers is probably one of Ohio State's permanent people. I mean, which is super gross, but, Indiana's going to have, one of them will have Indiana. Michigan State will have one of them. Michigan State would get Indiana probably, and because they have a trophy that they play for, a spittoon, I believe, and but I think honestly you're going to end up with Ohio State and Rutgers protected rivals, and that's not. I mean, am I changing my mind on this whole concept as I say that sentence out loud? Look, maybe, I don't know. I don't want to talk about it.
Well, in my 224 team conferences, I ended up having to put Rutgers in with Ohio State, and I sent Maryland to the Big Ten South. I'm like we can't have you both here. And Maryland is about as south as the Big Ten gets, I think. Based on I'm not a geology person. I'm a math person, Tom. I think we know that.
Maryland, I wouldn't say Big Ten South. I'd say more like the Big Ten Atlantic Coast. Could we make a whole conference out of the Atlantic Coast? Because Maryland seems like they'd be a great fit there.
No, because I have the SEC West, the SEC East, the SEC Atlantic, and the SEC Coastal. So the Atlantic and the Coastal are already taken by the SEC. The Big Ten West, we could Big Ten Pacific perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
And I have Notre Dame in the Big Ten Pacific, just so you know.
It would be really funny if Notre Dame got left behind in the. I don't know which would be funnier: Notre Dame getting left behind in the ACC when even Wake Forest is getting rescued out of there, or Notre Dame in the SEC. Can you imagine Notre Dame in the SEC? Be like all the conference meetings. It's just Notre Dame sitting with Vanderbilt in the corner, and everyone else throwing paper airplanes at them. I kind of want to live in that world. I want to experience that.
It would be fun for all, and maybe not much fun for Notre Dame, but who cares? Anyway, Tom, anything else before we go?
No, I think we've covered this. I think I've talked myself in and out of this whole concept, but yeah, I do think this would be an interesting exercise at some point this summer to try and figure out pods, because it just feels like. It seems like it's a really easy exercise, and then you're going to end up with a bunch of weird ones and ticking a lot of people off. And yeah, this is why is Maryland and Northwestern a protected rivalry? And the answer is shut up. That's because we said so. That's why. That
is the division, the Big Ten Misfit Island division. That's and they are cross divisions with the Big Ten rejects, and it works out. But that will do it for us today. Thank you all for joining us as always, and we'll talk to you guys later.